There are three altcoin trends that I think are going to do extremely well over the coming weeks and months that I want to dive into in today's show. One of the altcoins from one of these sectors I've never discussed publicly before, and I'm going to break down why I added it to my portfolio earlier this morning off the back of some major news that we got that I'm going to break down today. So hopefully by the end of today's video, you're going to have some new ideas in terms of altcoin trades, and hopefully today helps guide you over the coming weeks and months as to the narratives that I think are going to outperform in the crypto market. Firstly, let's get into Bitcoin and give a quick market update here. You can see that we're making a slight push up this morning, but still just meandering below this range high level. Nothing has really changed in terms of the setup on Bitcoin. Interestingly, price is compressing into prior all-time high with RSI resetting. So if we can continue to maintain some momentum in Bitcoin, I think this is going to hold us in good stead for a potential breakout. The other thing that we are getting is higher lows on the lower time frame. So this is starting to compress and look like a bit of a bull flag, which is a positive sign that a breakout may be days away. However, I am still cognizant of the fact that you do have some confluence here with the money noodle and this fair value gap at around the 107k zone, which is one of the potential dip buy zones. If we are lucky enough to get a dip into that zone, that is a level where I'd look at accumulating some spot altcoins. If not, you can look at a close above the 110 to 111k level on the daily for Bitcoin. That is a great risk on signal. But I said this in my AMA yesterday that as long as Bitcoin is holding above the 106k mark, which is the mid-range zone, I am open to altcoin trades as long as they align with the specific technicals on that altcoin. So I think it's very important right now, as we're heading into technical resistance on Bitcoin, to make sure that there's always technical confluence or some sort of risk management when you're opening individual trades, and just have an idea about the time frame when you're opening altcoin trades as to what you're trading on. For example, the coin that I'm going to speak about later today, the time frame for that trade is probably a few weeks or a couple of months. It's not, a 12-month hold, whereas there are other coins in my portfolio where I'd genuinely be happy to hold for the majority of the year, if not longer, if they keep performing. So I think that's an important distinction to make, just to make sure that you don't get trapped in certain positions. Now, there's an interesting data point here for Bitcoin, which bodes quite well for the bulls, and it basically indicates how the volume for Bitcoin is actually at its lowest reading since 2014. Now, of course, this is probably partly due to the fact that a lot of the latest inflows for Bitcoin are coming through micro strategies, leverage strategy are coming through the ETFs and aren't coming through the exchanges, but the volume is extremely low, and we're actually compressing into prior all-time highs and continuing to make bullish weeks and months despite volume actually decreasing. The last 3 times this has happened, this has been the precursor to massive runs on Bitcoin. You could see it in 2013, 2017, and 2025. However, as I mentioned before, the caveat to this would be not all the volume is coming on exchanges anymore. We didn't actually get this signal in the last bull run as prevalent as we are currently seeing it right now. But overall, dipping volume into rising price is a good sign because you're getting compression into a key zone. So I think the stage is pretty well set for Bitcoin, and it's looking very well set for ETH. Like if you look at Ethereum at the moment, it actually just broke above a key level. So if you want to go into the daily, one more close here and it actually could be a decent long. That is starting to confirm quite nicely. And if you want to look at ETH BTC just quickly, you can also see that it's starting to break out of its bull flag. We're going to discuss some of the ramifications there later. You can actually see that ETH is overtaking Bitcoin in terms of trading volume on the futures market. So I think a lot of speculative capital going into Ethereum now, preemptively trading a rotation for ETH. And this is not only representing on the exchanges in terms of volume, it's also representing on the on-chain statistics. We've seen a massive increase in the ETH validator queue this week. We've seen a multi-week positive inflow on the ETH liquid staking derivatives. We've also seen 17 consecutive days of spot ETH ETF inflow. So there's definitely a trade here, and recently I have shifted more of my portfolio into Ethereum after being offside Ethereum for quite some time, but the ETH BTC Reversal and the Sol ETH breakdown are all positive signs for me that ETH could continue outperforming, and I do think that's going to be the case over the next few months. At least that's my thesis. Look at ETH BTC here. You can see that it's just starting to potentially have its first daily close above this flag here. You have the RSI starting to tick back to the upside. The only thing is, technically, although this could be the makings of a breakout, you do have resistance here, so we would still need to break above that level because that is the prior high. But in terms of momentum, the good thing is that you are getting higher lows on the way up. You had a money noodle sweep, and now you are starting to close above the prior high. So all of this is positive momentum, constructive price action for Ethereum to potentially head higher versus Bitcoin. So overall, it's a good thing. And this has been aided by the fact that we've had even more clarity coming from the Senate that Ethereum is not a security. We saw the Clarity Act being passed, which means that Ethereum will now officially be recognized as infrastructure like the internet and not as a company selling stocks. Staked ETH ETFs are now 10 times more likely, and that is definitely a big narrative I think that you should be looking into that I discussed on yesterday's show. Ethereum staking and DeFi products I think are going to do really well, and it kind of feels like the sentiment around DeFi, because of the regulatory upheaval that we've seen, has completely done a 180. It feels like a breath of fresh air for DeFi, and almost like a DeFi renaissance, because all of these products which were previously limited, couldn't start in the US, are now opened up essentially to developing in America, and not only that, but receiving institutional investment in America, potentially getting ETFs, and also being adopted by like Trump's project World Liberty Finance. All this sort of stuff opens up off the back of positive regulation. So all this bodes well. It's a regulatory tailwind for the Ethereum ecosystem, and that's one of the reasons why we are seeing some traction at the moment. You can also see off the back of this, ETH has become the first liquid staking token held by a public company treasury. All this sort of stuff I think is going to become a lot more common with Republic Technologies, the Ethereum treasury of Beyond Medical Technologies, allocating a significant portion of its ETH into ETH, a first for institutional capital on Ethereum. So that's definitely a strong narrative right now, and one of the reasons why we're looking into lots of ETH liquid staking plays in the Discord, and that's been a lot of the stuff that we've been trading at the moment. For example, you could see Paradise here, who's our head low time frame trader. He's taking a trade on EIGEN. You can see that it's reacted quite well. It could be its first daily close also above its breakout level alongside Ethereum, and there's been a bunch of others as well. So in light of this regulatory shift and the current narratives that I'm seeing in the market, I'm going to go through in this video 3 trends that are heating up and I think offer potential outsized returns over the coming weeks and months. And I'm going to break down each narrative and go through the individual tokens that I think could perform well in that narrative and give you some nice little alpha tidbits and gems along the way. So it's based on this tweet from Gold, which I do agree with. He says there are narratives that are currently heating up in the market. Sol ETF plus Sol staking tokens going into July. We saw a recent announcement here that the SEC might be expediting the approval of spot Sol ETFs and staking in ETH and Sol ETFs in response to the recent Rex, Osprey, and N rounds. So you can see here, Eric Balchunas saying, get ready for a potential altcoin ETF summer with Solana likely leading the way, as long as other basket products. So we could potentially see a Sol ETF as well as an ETH staking ETF. So we've already touched on ETH staking. I don't want to go through the Ethereum narrative too much more in today's video because I've done it in prior videos, but I do want to start here by touching on some of the Sol plays because I have made some maneuvers over the past 24 hours regarding my portfolio. This is Gold's summary of the narrative, however, which I think is quite apt. He says, one of my highest conviction bets right now is Solana liquid staking. Solana liquid staking is such a small portion that the bet is quite asymmetrical in my eyes. Currently, Solana's 68% staking ratio, stemming from $57 billion worth of staked Sol, outpaces Ethereum's 28%. However, only 6.5%, $3.6 billion of Solana is involved in liquid staking compared to roughly 1/3 of Ethereum. 93% of staked Solana is still being staked natively, and with the massive popularity around Solana this cycle by normies, it makes sense in my eyes for it to grow exponentially. I did a post in my Discord where I said, since I de-risked some of my Solana for ETH, which is something I recently did because the chart started to break down, it gives me some exposure back into the ecosystem by looking at some of the Solana betas. So with my Sol portfolio, I'm still holding Solana long term, but I have shifted a little bit more out into Ethereum and the Ethereum ecosystem. However, to regain some exposure to the narrative, what I've looked at doing over the past day or so is re-adding some exposure exposure to the ecosystem proxies, because that way, if the market does rally, I have higher beta exposure to Solana without having to be in the weaker asset in my eyes. So I still get some upside from the narrative without being completely offside, even though I obviously have my Sol long-term bags to hedge. So when I was looking through all of the opportunities in the market, the one that stood out and the one that I posted in Discord earlier today was Cloud, which I've just added to my short to midterm portfolio. I said that the market cap looks slightly mispriced to me and the technicals are good. I'm going to have invalidation below the noodle, as you can see here, because it recently just flipped. You had a positive retest, RSI reset, so a nice clean setup, potential breakout of this high here, which could be coming in the coming days. It's on Bybit, it's on Kraken, so it has big exchange listings, and of course it's one of the main proxies for the Sol ETF plus Sol staking narrative. What I do like is that if you look at Jito, for example, one of its competitors, it's still a 30x away, and although I'm not saying it's going to 30x because there is a big market cap FDV discrepancy, it just shows you that at the 25 mil market cap, there's a lot of upside in a potential narrative like this. There's $1.725 billion locked in Sanctum validator LSTs, Cloud being the governance token of that ecosystem. J-Sik Choi here says the announcement of DeFi Dev Corp utilizing Sanctum Cloud as its staking infra, creating DFDV Sol, maybe one of the reasons why Cloud is underappreciated to many more treasuries to come. And you can see the price actually pumped on that news before retracing just a little bit in accordance with my chart. So that is one that I like in the market. I post all of my new adds to my portfolio first in the Discord, so to make sure that you are always there for the early alpha, because I don't always have time to make a video and there are just some plays that I just share in Mars High Club. Make sure you do join if you aren't already. Link in the description below. Come be a part of the community. I wholeheartedly believe we have built the best community in crypto. Amazing alpha, not only from me in my chats, but also from our other analysts like Paradise, for example, who's been absolutely crushing it. I know you guys have seen his shows on his trades, many amazing, great trades as well for him over the last 24 hours. Again, he had a good LAUNCHCOIN trade, EIGEN layer. You can see LAUNCHCOIN here was a 50% move. You could see Tron as well. He had a massive 20% move. Bitcoin, he had a good trade on as well. So it's not just me. It is. It's a bigger ecosystem than that. But of course, if you're in the Discord, you're going to get my earliest alpha. So come join there, especially in a market like this, where a lot of narratives are starting to crop up, where a lot of on-chain stuff is starting to crop up. It's definitely been a bit of an on-chain revival to kick off this week. That is going to be the place to be. I'm also doing an on-chain trading challenge very soon, which is going to be cool. We're going to upload the results of that on the YouTube channel soon. So yeah, lots of cool stuff happening over in the Discord. Now, I just wanted to give you some other options for Sol staking plays. I haven't added these to my portfolio yet, but I would consider them. You can look at KMNO Finance. You can see deposits on KMNO have surged. It's now the third largest lending protocol in terms of active loans and deposits. So that is potentially an ecosystem proxy, which looks relatively cheap, in my opinion, relative to its competitors. You've also got ORCA, which is a DEX on Solana. This also is at a reasonable valuation, in my opinion. So these are some ways that you can get exposure to the ecosystem beyond Solana. But I'd say for now, Cloud is my pick. And then, of course, you've got things like Jupiter, but they are a little bit less direct towards the staking narrative, which I think is cropping up right now, both for Ethereum and Solana. Now, the second narrative that I think is going to heat up very, very soon, and this also has strong regulatory tailwinds with everything that's happening in the SEC camp and with Trump and with stablecoin adoption, is RWA. I mean, RWA has actually been exploding. If you look at the total value locked in this sector, it's now $12.598 billion. It's been one of the most obvious and fast-growing trends in crypto, one that is close to my heart. As you know, on the channel, we've publicly traded ONDO from 0.2 cents all the way to, I think at one point it was $1.50. Sorry, 20 cents. 0.2 of a dollar. So that was like a 6 or a 7, 8x at one point, which was crazy. Mantra, I mean, I know it dropped, but it was one of my best trades, and I publicly sold relatively close to the top, not during that final run up, but halfway up at around $3. I first got into that on the channel at like 40 cents. So, some of my best trades this cycle have actually been on the RWA stuff, but there are a couple more tokens that I'm still looking to either add exposure to, or I still think haven't had major runs yet, like ONDO and Mantra did earlier in the cycle. One of them is CHEX. I think this is coiling quite nicely. Now, obviously, you can play the technicals on this one. So you've got your support zone at 0.17, and then you've got your breakout zone at 0.26. So you may just choose to trade on either side of the support and resistance there. But what I do like is the fact that you have higher lows and you have some compression here starting to happen. Volatility is diminishing, and you're also seeing higher lows. So you're seeing that happening in tandem with an uptrend. So it's actually flipped back above the noodle again. If you go into the 4 hourly, you can see that. And I think this one is going to run at some point. I know it's just chopping for now, but I think with one announcement, it can fly. I mean, we've seen that in the past, right? They've announced something and it's gone absolutely mental. So this is something that I'm still keeping my eye on. A recent RWA trade, which has been an absolute killer, well done to everyone who joined me on this, is Syrup. This is one of my newer RWA bags that I've added to my portfolio. It recently just broke above range high. It's now in price discovery. It's at 50 cents. I first called this in the Discord, as you can see here, on the 31st of May. At 34 cents, and since then it's been on a huge rally. And then since then, I've also mentioned it on the show many times around this mid-range zone. I didn't get my full fill because we didn't tag range low, so I only got a part of my fill at 38 cents and then another bit here on the breakout. So still nice, getting an average entry around 40 cents, but it's only technically 40% up since my first call and the first time I mentioned it. So I still think it does have room to go now that it's just breaking into price discovery. You can wait for cooldowns on these things. I mean, even after this big rally, it had a cooldown. After this rally, it had a cooldown, rally, cooldown, rally, cooldown, consolidation, rally, and then could have another cooldown here. If you start to form a flag, this is a good strategy for you guys. It's called rally-based rally. It's a system that Paradise teaches in MHC, and it's you get rally, then you form a base, then on the break of that trend, you can enter again, you form a base, on the break of that high, you can enter again, you form a base, on the break of that high, because we don't know where it's formed yet, it could go up here and then start to form, then you have these flag patterns, and then they keep expanding to the upside. That is a classic uptrend, rally-based rally. And then you have inval below, if you break below the prior low, and your breakout trade above, and then you can catch the next leg to the upside. So potentially look at price discovery continuation on this. If this is the base that ends up forming, let's say something like this, you can bid the retest, and then it should continue going. So as long as the uptrend maintains, and then of course you have your full spot inval below here, because then it would signify that it's going to tuck back into the range. But it's been a great one that I added. Didn't get my full position, but very, very happy. And I know MHC guys did really well on that one. And then the final narrative that I think you need to be paying attention to right now, and I've spoke about it in prior shows, so I won't recap the whole narrative, but for the people that haven't seen my recent shows, stablecoins are a huge trend right now. I mean, they're the fastest growing vertical in crypto. They also have regulatory tailwinds. I think it's going to be like a DeFi summer, so to speak. That seems to be where all of the attention and all of the momentum is right now. And there's a lot of stablecoin plays which just haven't really run yet, even though the narrative is hot. I mean, I know MakerDAO's exploding as one of the main proxies. I know Syrup is doing really, really well. But I mean, you've got Athena on the daily and weekly, which hasn't really woken up yet. This looks like at some point it's going to push up and hopefully flip this 40-cent region. This is a trade. Remember, not everything's a long-term hold. Like, I am holding some of this long-term, by the way, but there is a portion of my bag that I would just love to trade on a flip here of the money noodle on this level. If it could consolidate here for a bit, I'd love to get an entry, and then I think you're targeting the 70-cent zone. So just keep your eye on this one if it continues to move. That's definitely a trade I'll be taking. Another token that I'd look into before I get into one of my lower cap plays here is Fluid. Fluid is just consolidating. It's a very, very, very solid protocol. It covers DeFi and stablecoins, allows you to get yield on chain. And I like the guys behind it, and I think they've built great tech, and they've had a lot of TVL growth and traction. So this one's just ranging, similar to CHEX. What you want to wait for is a breakout of this level. Wait for some momentum, wait for consolidation, buy into that, and then hopefully you get expansion. I mean, not every token is going to follow this pattern, but I'm just giving you the layout of how you would actually enter a trade. You don't need to be always just aping spot in the middle of a range. You can play breakouts, and you can have shorter term validations or invalidations for even positions that you want to trade. Because remember, the thing about crypto is you just want to catch the meat of the move. So you can theoretically miss this portion, right? But if it ends up doing this later, all you're trying to do is catch the meat. So yeah, you might miss the original 15%, but then after that, there could be another 100%. So you won't really care about missing that first 15%. So in crypto, yeah, there's going to be a little bit of bone on either side, but you're just trying to catch the meat in the middle. And I think generally that's really what the game of trading is. You're just trying to get exposure to a token that you're bullish on, but you're trying to make sure that you don't expose yourself to too much downside while exposing yourself to the major upside of that coin. That's why I believe in a dual approach of investing. Have a core portfolio of 5 to 10 altcoins, and then with the rest of your portfolio, it could be 20%, 30%, whatever it is, even in some cases 50%, which is probably where I am right now. Maintain more liquidity and then use that to go in and out of coins on a lower time frame basis. And lower time frame for some people could be weeks to months, but treating altcoins as trades and not structural holds all the time can be a good thing. But then again, there are some coins which I'll just hold because I'm just bullish at some point they'll run, and I don't really want to time it too much, and that's also okay as long as you have some technicals attached. One of the lower to mid cap stablecoin tokens that I like that hasn't run too much yet because they recently just launched and they launched their new product is ASF, Asymmetry Finance. You can see it did tag this low. That was actually a great zone to enter. I did mention this I think a week or two ago on the show. I said if it gets down to this level, that would be a great zone to bid. We are now starting to reclaim the money noodle, so keep your eye on that from a technical perspective. But with these on-chain coins, it's best to go more off valuations, which is quite low on ASF, and on fundamentals rather than technicals, because they aren't going to be liquid enough and not enough people are paying attention to them to give TA the same efficacy that you might get, on a larger liquidity coin. But in terms of the traction, you can see USD AF is gaining some nice traction in terms of total collateral, hitting 5 million. The USD AF total SP pool is 2 million, and you can see here the total supply is now 3 million with 6.74 million TVL. So it is growing nicely, which is a good sign. And you can see here, Justin, who is the founder of Asymmetry Finance, said a USD AF Degen looped his S-Frax USD to get 50% plus APY while paying a fixed rate of just 0.5%. After 1 week, he was redeemed, not liquidated, and made 8.7% over 1 week. He made money while getting redeemed. USD AF is just getting warmed up. The flywheel kicks off this week. So I think the protocol really appeals to bigger whales that want to park capital. You could put up Bitcoin as collateral, for example. We know there's billions of dollars in Bitcoin just sitting in wallets, not really capital efficient, just sitting there. If people want to collateralize it to unlock liquidity, they can mint USD AF, they can get a fixed rate on that, and they can essentially, earn yield on their Bitcoin, instead of just holding it. Obviously, you do take on a bit of smart contract risk, and I don't recommend people put their entire Bitcoin portfolios into these pools. But for some people, it's a really, really, really good thing. And because of the lack of opportunities for, Bitcoin and ETH collateral, I think mechanisms like this are super cool, and they're backed by a bunch of big players as well. So you can check that out and do a little bit more research in your own time. If you want to pause the video and look into this, these are some of the notes that I made prior to the show. Instead of renting liquidity, the protocol uses emissions to buy money-making assets. This builds permanent revenue-producing war chest that keeps the ecosystem self-funded forever. It soaks up supply and creates steady buy pressure. You can read through all of these points, basically, that go behind the USD AF flywheel. Look, it's a lower cap token, so you're probably not going to size into it the same as you would some other tokens, but if it pays off, I do think it does have mechanics behind it to do quite well in terms of price, and obviously it is in a narrative stablecoins, which is really, really hot. So that's why I'm holding a position there. And that is pretty much it for the video. To recap the narratives, you have the Solana and the ETH staking plays. I think they're big. RWA, which is also getting a bit of a kick in terms of a regulatory tailwind, and also stablecoins, which are in the same boat. You'll notice a lot of the coins I'm looking at right now are coins that are benefiting from some of the recent changes that we are seeing to the regulatory landscape of crypto in the US, and also directly benefit from Ethereum and the current rotation that we are seeing. Subscribe to the channel if you want more. Link in the description to Miles High Club if you want to join. Come be a part of the best community in crypto, and I'll see you in the next video tomorrow. Have a nice rest of your day, guys. Peace out.